Hilchos Geirushin Perek Asiri, the laws of divorce, chapter 10. The topic of today is the practical ramifications of an invalid divorce. We've been talking for many chapters about divorces that are good, divorces that are not good, rabbinically good, biblically good. What does it actually mean if you have a canceled divorce? And a lot of fascinating cases about what happens if down the line you discover that there's an invalid divorce. So a guy divorces his wife, she goes and gets remarried, and then it turns out that it was a bad divorce. Now what happens? There's a lot of similar cases like that, and actually, interestingly enough, though the Rambam is so organized and he always sticks to the topic, here he's going to also start mixing in cases of death as they relate to this topic. So for example, a guy leaves on a trip and the wife hears that he died. On the basis of certain testimony, she's allowed to get remarried. She gets remarried and the old husband shows up. Now what do you do? It's a similar concept, so it kind of comes together. And that's where we're heading today. Says the Rambam halacha aleph, kol mokim sha'amarnu b'chibur zeh. Any place where we say in this entire work, shahaget batal, that a divorce is void, and as we learned, void means biblically void, oy eina get, oy eina migureshes, or if we use the expression, it's not a divorce, or she's not divorced, the practical ramifications of that are, hareze get batal min ha-Torah. First of all, it's biblically void. Va'adayin hi eishes ish gemura. And what that means is, biblically void means she's still, for all intents and purposes, she's still a completely married wife. And as you can see here on the screen, it works both leniently and stringently. It works stringently that the niseis, if she gets married on the basis of that void divorce, teitzei v'havlad mamzer. She needs to leave the second husband, and any children born from that union have an X over them over here. They're illegitimate. On the other hand, v'im haya baila kohen, if her original husband was a Kohen, and a Kohen cannot stay married to a divorcee, if the Kohen gives her a void divorce, it's so void that loy nesra alav mishum grusha. She's not forbidden to him as a divorcee. She's literally not a divorcee. She can still stay married, that's the check over here, she can still stay married to the Kohen. Chutz, with one exception, very specific exception. Chutz min ha-megareshes ishtay v'amar, if somebody divorces his wife and tells her, hareat megureshes mimeni ve'ein at muteres lakol. Strange wording. He says, you're divorced from me, but you're no longer permitted to marry anybody else. Sha'afal pishein zeget, even though, of course, halachically, that's not a divorce. You can't hold any rights over your wife. If you want to divorce her, it has to be a complete cutoff. You can't say, you're divorced from me, but you can't marry anybody else. So even though it's not a divorce, harezu psula la kahuna midivrein. The sages said that she can no longer stay married to a Kohen if her original husband is a Kohen. Shanemar, because look what it says. This is the verse here in Vayikra that describes the prohibition for a Kohen to marry a divorcee. It doesn't just say a divorcee they cannot marry. It says, Shanemar v'isha gerusha me'isha. A woman who is divorced from her husband, lo yikachu, they cannot take. A Kohen cannot marry a woman divorced from her husband. Now, that's a lot of extra words. Torah's not an extra storybook. It writes everything precisely. Why did it write v'isha gerusha me'isha? Amru chachamim, the sages said, afilu lo nisgarsha ela me'isha. Even if the only person she is divorced from is her husband, v'lo hutra lakoil, and she did not become permitted to everybody else. In other words, referring to this strange case where the husband said, you're divorced from me, but you're not permitted to anybody else, nesra la kahuna. That's enough already to forbid her from staying married to the Kohen. V'zehu reach haget. This is, if you learn Talmud and you come across the words reach haget, the smell of a divorce, this is the case of the smell of the divorce. It's not an actual divorce. It's like a smell of fish. Fish is in the room. You can smell it even if you can't actually see it or touch it. So there's a divorce, there's a smell of a divorce in the room, even though it's not an actual halachic divorce, but this is a smell of it, shepaisal bakahuna midivreim, which rabbinically will disqualify the woman from staying married to the Kohen. But again, typically, giving a biblically void divorce means you're allowed to stay married to your husband if he's a Kohen. That's how void it is. Halacha beis v'chol makom sha'amarnu b'chibur zeh shahaget pasol, but anywhere that we said in this work that the divorce is only disqualified, that's the word we use over here. Hareza pasol midivrei soifrim bilvad. It's only rabbinically disqualified, and therefore it works the opposite way. Rabbinically disqualified means it's a good divorce, biblically. Hence, she's forbidden to marry a Kohen. On the other hand, v'lo tinaseh lechatchila, she only should not get married initially. V'im niseis lo teitze, if she gets remarried on her own volition with a disqualified divorce, after the fact, we're not going to force her out of the marriage. V'havlad kosher, any babies born from the second union will be kosher children, because again, biblically, it's a good divorce, which works in her favor in this case, that she was allowed to get remarried after the fact. Now, the Rambam says, though, the kaisvin la get acher kosher, in the case where a woman has a disqualified divorce and she got remarried, even though we're going to let her stay in the marriage, we do want to solidify the original divorce. So we have the original husband write a second kosher divorce, fully kosher, which we give to her while she's married to her second husband. And this way, we cover all of our bases. But if it's impossible to write a second divorce, the first husband ran away or he's gone or whatever it is, and the second husband, he's a careful Jew, and he decides on his own accord to divorce his wife, to keep her, with no issues. If they have no children from this marriage, that's a very good and praiseworthy move. But if they've already had children from the second marriage, it's actually not advisable. Do not divorce your new wife now because of the original disqualification of the divorce, because that can cause bad rumors for your kids. People will start thinking, oh, why is he divorcing his second wife? There's kids here. Oh, was the first divorce not a good divorce? Well, maybe they're illegitimate. And you don't want to cause those problems. Since in the end of the day, biblically it's kosher, just better stay in the marriage. Again, if you can get the original husband to write a divorce, very good. But if not, then leave it as it is. Halacha Gimel. V'chol makom she'amarnu b'chibur zeh harei zeh sfeik Geirushin. Any place where we say in this work that it's a doubtful divorce, or shehi safek migureshes, or the words is, she is doubtfully divorced, what we mean is the following. Lo tinaseh, she cannot get remarried on the basis of this doubtful divorce. But here, if she does get remarried, even after the fact, we will force her out of the marriage. The havlad safek mamzer, and a baby is in question. We can't say he's for sure illegitimate. We're not sure if he's illegitimate. Because she was perhaps a married woman.
What's the status?
So the status of a doubtful mamzer, we're going to see in the Laza, in the 5th book of the Rambam. What happens? How do you treat a doubtful mamzer? If a person divorces his wife with a disqualified divorce, or she's a doubtful divorce, and he wants to remarry her. Because till now we're talking about, can she marry somebody else? What about the original husband himself? If you divorce your wife with a rabbinically disqualified divorce, can you just take her back? So the Rambam says, she's actually fully permitted to her original husband. He doesn't even have to redo the marriage, or to make the 7 blessings, or to rewrite a marriage document, unless, of course, she has a complete divorce. But until there's a complete divorce, you can simply just remarry your wife. The commentaries say that you may have to give her a new ring. You may have to reconsecrate her. But the nisu'in, the second stage of the marriage, you don't have to redo. Halacha dalet. Kol mi sheniseis begeit batel. If a woman gets a void divorce, which we basically call not divorced, and she nevertheless gets remarried to a second person, harezu tzricha get mi bal sheni midivreim. The sages enacted that the second husband also has to give her a divorce. In other words, now think about it. If a woman is not divorced and she marries somebody else, that's not a marriage. So you wouldn't need a divorce, you would think. Because you only need a divorce from a marriage.
Not divorce.
So I'm saying, since she wasn't divorced from her first husband, and she goes and marries a second husband, that second husband shouldn't require a divorce. It should just dissolve the marriage, go home. But the sages said she has to have a divorce. Why? So people shouldn't think, oh, here's a married woman leaving a marriage with no divorce. They're not going to know all the specifics. So the sage says, you know what, give her a divorce as well. She also needs to have a divorce from the first husband to let her remarry, because whenever a woman commits adultery, she cannot stay married to either husband. So both of them get messed up. She needs a divorce from both of them. She can no longer have relations with either of them ever, even if it was only inadvertent, it was a mistake. She didn't realize that it was a bad divorce. And she marries a second guy, it messes over both of them. So nobody should ever say, hey, look at the first guy. He's remarrying his divorcee after she got married to somebody else. If either one of them actually remarries her, we force them out. This is a very tragic situation. When you have a void divorce and she gets married to somebody else, both husbands lose out. She cannot marry either of them, and both of them must provide a divorce as well. Halacha hey, here you see that I'm bringing in the case of death. The same law applies. If you have a woman who witnesses come and testify that her husband died. This can happen right now today. Husband went to Gaza to fight, right? 2 witnesses come back and say, hey, your husband passed away. Venisa, she gets married. And boom, the guy shows up. I wonder if I have a... No. Soon I have a very fun comic for this, okay? We'll have one of the cases. My wife was helping me out make the pictures. She made a nice comic here. Okay, the woman gets married, and then her husband shows up. Whether her original husband was a competent person or mentally unstable, deaf mute, or her new husband was competent or deaf mute. Where anyways the marriage is not complete. We force her out of the marriage from both of them. She requires a divorce from both of them. And is forbidden to ever have relations with either of them forever. What if she only gets consecrated? She didn't get fully married. She only gets consecrated. And then her original husband shows up, or it turns out that it was an invalid divorce. Here she can return to her original husband. Of course, the second husband is forbidden to stay married to, but the first one she can stay with. No need even for a divorce from the second person, because consecration doesn't even take hold on a woman who you're forbidden to marry biblically. This is a married woman. The guy gave the ring, it means nothing. So no divorce is needed. Why aren't we worried that here people will say, oh, there's a married woman leaving without a divorce? Because she wasn't married. Since she never actually got married, people will say, this is not a married woman. And probably he gave the consecration on condition and it wasn't fulfilled. In other words, people will rationalize always. So if you can rationalize in a permitted way, then we don't have to impose new restrictions. If the only rationalization is, here's a married woman leaving with no divorce, yeah, then you have to give a divorce. But here, people will just easily say there was a condition and it wasn't fulfilled. So it's fine. Halacha zayin ha'isha sheniseis v'nimtza haget batal. Oiba baila achar shashama shemes. In the above cases, where a woman gets married and it turns out her divorce is void, or her husband shows up after she thought he died, ein habal arishan ba'asheni. Not only are there stringencies with regard to divorce, both husbands lose all the rights. Both husbands are not zakain. They cannot acquire loy b'mitziasa v'loy b'masei yadeha. They cannot acquire her found objects. They don't get her handiwork. They don't get the rights to annul her vows. If they had eaten fruit from the property of the woman after she got married, we don't expropriate it from them. After the fact, they can keep it. However, they have no further rights. She doesn't have the right to a ksuba payout, neither of the conditions attached to the ksuba, no support entitled from either of them. If she actually takes it, she must give it back to them. Any property that wore out or got lost that she brought into the marriage. Even if from the guaranteed property, remember this, there are 2 types of property. You have nichse meloig, a woman brings into a marriage usufruct property, which a husband can use the fruit but not the land. Nichse tzayin barzel is guaranteed. There's a fixed value. The husband gets all the rights to the property and he must replace the basic value. If any of those properties went down in value, wore out or lost, neither husband is responsible for them. She cannot expropriate it from them. Whatever property is intact, of course, she can take as she leaves. But any worn out, in other words, losses that she has to have replenished or reimbursed, she cannot demand it from either husband. The havlad min hasheni mamzer. In either case, if she has children from the second husband, he's illegitimate. And if the first husband has relations with her before the second husband provides a divorce, his baby will also be illegitimate rabbinically. If the second man divorced her, and she already took the kesuba payout. And only then the husband shows up, or it turns out that the original divorce was invalid. So like so many things happened here. The first marriage seemingly ended. She started and ended a second marriage, and then the first husband shows up. We don't expropriate from her whatever she took, food or the kesuba payout. The second marriage began and ended. Leave it be, let it be. Halacha ches. V'chein hadin be'achin. The same law applies to brothers. Okay, here we have the comic. I don't know if you can see it on the screen here. You have two brothers here, okay? Shekidesh echad isha. One of them consecrated a woman. See, he says, Harei at mikudeshet li. And there's the brother, he's wishing mazel tov. Beautiful. V'holach achiv, v'shama bay shemes. Now, the brother hears that his groom brother died. See, he tells his wife, I'll be back in a few weeks. He's taking a trip. Then she hears the news, I'm sorry to tell you, your husband dies. So what does he do? V'yibe mes ishtay. Now this brother needs to marry the wife, because if the husband dies childless, the live brother has to do yibum, levirate marriage. So he goes, great. He marries the woman. Hareyat ishti, you're my wife. And then the first husband shows up. He comes back. Goes, what's going on over here? And then he comes back. Unfortunately here, she must leave both brothers. She has to get a divorce from both brothers. And all the above mentioned stringencies apply to her. Neither brother can provide for her, neither brother can get money out of she can get money from any of them. All the chumrot, all the stringencies apply. And the same thing applies on the flip side if the issue was not with the man but with the woman. So too, im kidesh isha, if somebody marries, consecrates a wife. Okay? Now this is her sister over here. There is a law, you cannot marry two sisters in each other's lifetime. So here you go. A man consecrates a woman. She takes a trip. So here she's telling him, I'll be back in a few weeks. And he hears that she dies. Sorry to tell you, your wife has died. So now, so he goes and marries the wife, the sister, the second woman. So then it comes out, OMG, she's back. And she's still alive, fully alive. Unfortunately, both women need a divorce. And all the laws apply to both of them. They both tragically cannot be married to him forever.
And the kids are mamzerim?
Kids are mamzerim. That was all if you notice the words were kidesh. He only consecrated. But if she was already fully married, a woman was fully married. Okay, let's go back to this case. Let's call this not just harat mikudeshetli, but he actually married her. And she went on a trip. And v'shama b'shamesa, he hears that she died. V'nasa achoisa, and he marries his sister. V'nimtzes ishta kayemes, and it turns out his original wife was alive. Ein achoisa tzricha mimenu get. Fascinatingly, this second woman, the sister, does not require a divorce. V'ishtay muteres, and he can go right back to his original wife. Why? Because she is an erva. She is a fully biblically prohibited woman, and there was no marriage at all. Any other case of a mistaken prohibition, where you married a woman thinking she was permitted to you, and then it came out that she was actually biblically prohibited on the highest level, no need for a divorce, because no consecration takes hold on the erva, on a woman who is prohibited biblically. So now why in the original case of just consecration, why in the case of just giving the ring, would you have to give the sister a divorce in the first case? So the Rambam says, Shemal Yemru, because people will say, T'nai haya ba'erusin v'chadas nasa achaisa. Maybe he was never really married to the first sister. Maybe there was a condition that was not fulfilled, and when he married the second sister, it was fully okay. And she will need a divorce. And once she needs a divorce, once you're divorcing the sister with a proper divorce, the original sister also becomes forbidden. So nobody should say that here's a guy marrying the sister of his divorcee. We're going to see later that when you divorce a woman, you automatically become forbidden to marry any of her close relatives forever. So since he's forced to divorce this woman, Now she, as a sister, becomes the sister of the divorcee. He cannot marry her either. That's why in the case of consecration, both women get messed up. But in the case of a full-on marriage, where we know that he married the first sister, so the second sister is a full-on erva. She's literally fully prohibited. So it's going to work to his favor on both levels. He won't be required to divorce her, and he'll be allowed to remarry his first wife. Yud Aleph. Let's talk about another case of a later discovered invalid divorce. Kosav HaSofer, the scribe wrote the divorce, V'ta, and he made a mistake. V'nasan get le'ish v'shover le'isha. And he gave the document of divorce to the man and the receipt to the woman. Typically, what's supposed to happen is after a marriage ends, the woman should walk away with the divorce document and the husband should walk away with a receipt that says, I paid up the kesuba. Otherwise, she's going to claim later and he'll make him repay again. But the scribe gave the wrong document to the wrong people. The husband walks out with the divorce and she walks out with the receipt. So she's not even divorced. Hey, they made a mistake. The husband took the divorce and she took the receipt. Commentators explain that it happened right, but then they exchanged them. The scribe gave the wife the divorce and the husband the receipt, and they exchanged them. Instead of usually giving the husband the divorce and the wife the receipt, and then they would exchange them properly, they exchanged them improperly. So they ended up with the husband holding the divorce and the wife holding the receipt. So everybody walks away thinking she's divorced. And then 2 months later, the husband's going through his stuff and he sees that he has the divorce document.
No receipt. He
has no receipt. Instead, he has the divorce, which he never gave to his wife. So the Rambam says, interestingly, if she had not yet gotten married, so of course she's not divorced. It's just not out in the open that she's not divorced. Simply give her the divorce in front of two witnesses. And she'll be divorced from the date of receiving the divorce. But if she had already gotten married, and the husband shows up one day in court holding the divorce and saying, hey, my wife never got divorced, it's in my hand, look at it, she doesn't have it. We actually don't believe him. We don't listen to him to forbid her on the second husband. We're actually going to assume that she was divorced, and simply she lost the document, it fell out of her hand, and the husband maliciously found it, and he wants to forbid her on the second husband. So even if it's, in other words, the court will look at it always leniently. If she hasn't yet gotten married, sure, give her the divorce, let her get married. If she already got married, no, we don't accept your opinion here. Leave, and yes, we're not going to interrupt the second marriage, exactly. Halacha Yud Beis. Hamaitzi as ishtay mishum shem ra, oy mishum shei prutza bin nadarim. This is a case to avoid later on a problem. A man is divorcing his wife because of bad rumors. Okay, in the end of the laws of marriage, we talked about a woman who we don't have any concrete proof of any bad doings, but the circumstances look really bad. Like we walked into a room and there she was with another man. They're both putting their pants on. Okay, we didn't see anything wrong, but it just looks weird. Or she's hanging out too much with young men. So you divorce your wife because of this bad rumor, or because she was making too many vows, and you didn't like that. We tell the husband at the time of divorce to say, say verbally, say that you're divorcing her for this reason, to chastise her. And know that you can never remarry her. Why? What's the reason for this? How come we don't allow to remarry a divorcee in this case? Because the decree is maybe she's going to get remarried and she'll do repentance, she'll do tshuva. And she'll act modestly under the second husband. The first husband will say, oh, 1 second, I didn't know she was such a big tzaddikus. Had I known that she was thinking to repent, I would never divorce her. Which is a big problem, because if a guy says that, he can be retroactively basically saying, I only divorced on condition that she was immodest, it was not a fulfilled condition, and now the divorce is void retroactively. Therefore, we tell the husband initially, if he comes to divorce his wife for a bad rumor, we tell him, decide right now that you're going to divorce her because she's not coming back. We're not going to allow you to disrupt a later marriage because you thought that she was a fully bad woman. Now, if he remarries her before she even gets consecrated to anybody, that's okay. We're not going to force him out. But typically, we would make him say that so that you don't come to such a problem. Similarly, if a person divorces his wife for a physical defect, she's barren, she sees blood every time there's relations, he can never remarry her if he divorces her on those grounds. Because maybe she'll get married to somebody else, and miraculously her problems will be cured. The barren woman will give birth, the bleeding woman will become healed. And then the first husband will say, 1 second, that wasn't, that's not what I paid for. If I had known that she can get healed, I would never have divorced her. Which is going to cause the divorce to be void, any kids to be illegitimate. So the sages said, you know what, if you're going to divorce her on this grounds, make sure you say right now verbally, you're never going to remarry her. Now again, if you transgressed and you remarried her before she got married to anybody else, then it's okay. But initially we won't let you get married. Yudalit. Shliach shehevi get chutz laaretz. If an agent brings a divorce from the diaspora, the amar b'fanei nichtav b'fanei nechtam, and he has to say, as we learned the other day, he has to testify that he was there when it was written and signed. So he says that. Harei lo yisa'ena. Even though we believe the agent to help the woman get divorced, he cannot marry the woman. Because that sounds like some serious trickery. We suspect maybe he put his eyes on her, and that's why he's helping her out with testimony. Similarly, if one witness comes and testifies to a woman that her husband died, and she gets married on that basis, he, that witness, cannot marry her. Because wherever it looks fishy, we don't let the marriage happen. If a sage forbids a woman to be in a marriage with her husband based on a vow, there are some vows that if a woman says this vow, she can no longer stay married to the husband. So they come to the sage to come to annul the vow. And the sage says, you know what, I'm sorry. I just can't find a way to annul the vow. You have to get divorced. The sage should not later marry the woman because it looks really bad. It looks like he purposely forbade the woman to the husband so he can marry her. Similarly, if there's a rumor going around that a person had relations with a maidservant, and then she's freed, she becomes a full Jew and he wants to marry her. Or there's rumors going around that this guy has been with a non-Jew, and she becomes a Jew. The guy who the rumors are spreading around, he cannot marry her. Similarly, if there was a non-Jew or a slave who married a Jewish woman, even if he then goes and gets converted, or the slave becomes freed, he cannot marry her. If you, after the fact, went ahead and married them, then it's okay, we're not going to disrupt the marriage. And based on this, the rabbis today talk about when Jewish men marry non-Jewish women, or the opposite, intermarriage, we should actually encourage, if we can, conversion. Because the marriage is not going anywhere, and better than living in complete sin, that we should see if we can solve it. But initially, if somebody begins a relationship with a non-Jew, and then they convert, we don't let the marriage happen. Tesvav, v'chulan shahayu lahen nashim. Now, in any of the above cases, there's rumors going around that he's been with a non-Jew, or with a maidservant, etc. If he already has another wife, umesu nishayseya and oishan yizgarshu, and that original wife dies or gets divorced, it was the woman who instigated the divorce. In other words, on the woman's initiative they got divorced. These men can then marry those other women, the fresh convert or the fresh freed slave, initially no problem. Or if these women got married to somebody else, and their marriage dissolved by widowhood or by divorce, the women can then get married to these men, no problem. Because now it doesn't look so bad. They actually got married to someone else and the marriage ended, you're just taking them up after that marriage. And all of these women, she can get married to the son of the witness who testified for her. Or the son of the wise man, the sage, who forbade the vow. Or the son of the man who there's a rumor about. Or any of their relatives. She'ein adam chayte kedei sheyehana acher. We have a rule in halacha. Nobody does a sin for somebody else's benefit. If you do a sin, it's going to be for your own benefit. You don't. The agent won't falsely testify so his son can get married to the woman. It doesn't work that way. Even father and son. Now, if they're proper witnesses, 2 witnesses to a divorce, 2 witnesses to a miyun, refusal when a child leaves a marriage, as we'll see tomorrow at length, there the woman can get married to one of the witnesses. Or to one of the judges in front of whom she performed chalitza to get out of the levirate marriage. We only worry about when there's one witness, that he might be testifying falsely. But if there's 2, she can marry one of them. It's okay. As a general principle, if you can be a witness, you should rather be a witness to a marriage that's dissolving, a minor marriage that's dissolving. You should better stay away from that, and rather get involved in a chalitza, a woman getting out of a levirate marriage, which actually releases her from the bond and allows her to get married to many, many more people. Halacha Yud Zayin, a person divorces his wife, and he goes and has relations with her again, while witnesses are watching, before she gets married to anybody else. And whether her first marriage dissolved out of the consecration, the first stage, or even after the marriage was consummated. Since she was his wife at one point, we have to assume that he actually remarried her. He was marrying her with the intent of proper marriage and not just to be promiscuous. Even if we see him giving her money, seems like he's paying her as a prostitute, doesn't matter. Because we have a principle in halacha, there's a presumption. A person will never have relations with his wife in a promiscuous way if he can do it in a proper way. Therefore, we have to assume that she was actually fully consecrated again. And if she wants to leave that marriage again, she requires a second divorce. If only they went into privacy in front of 2 witnesses, not actual relations, which means that both witnesses were watching at once. If the marriage had dissolved after it was originally consummated, we have to worry that perhaps she had relations again. The same witnesses watching them go into seclusion can testify that they probably had relations. Because in general, when you consecrate a woman with relations, you don't have to actually have the act in front of witnesses. You simply just go into seclusion and do the thing, as we've explained. Therefore, since we know that they were previously married and they're not going into seclusion again, she will require a new divorce out of doubt, and she is newly remarried in doubt. But if the original marriage had dissolved only after consecration, they were never fully married, the fact that now they're back in seclusion is not a reason for suspicion. He isn't familiar enough with her. There were probably no relations initiated. Yud says the Rambam. Some of the Gaonim have ruled that any woman who has relations in front of witnesses, tzricha get, has to have a divorce. Not just a woman who was in a marriage and then divorced, as we said in the last halacha, but a regular woman. If we see a woman out of wedlock, simply having relations, she needs to have a divorce from that guy. Chazaka she'ein adam eisa bilase bilas for the same presumption. That guy doesn't just want to have promiscuous relations, he probably married her. And they made this matter so big, and they kept on adding to it, this imagined ruling that they had, ad shahayru, till they ruled, that if somebody has a son by his maidservant, we have to worry that he probably freed her and made her into his full-fledged wife, to the point that his other wife, if he dies childless from her, won't have to do yibum. Because maybe he freed his wife and only then had relations with her. Because why would he do a promiscuous relations if he could do a proper one? And so he has a kid. No yibum is required. Some Gaonim even go so far as to say that for sure he freed her. Not just maybe. For sure he freed her. Because the person won't make his relations promiscuous if he doesn't have to. Says the Rambam, all of these rulings are very far in my eyes from the way of properly ruling halacha. And do not rely on them. The sages only gave this presumption if it's a woman who you were married to and you divorced. Or if you had a condition in the marriage and then you had relations without the condition. In which case she is your wife. Only with your wife do we say the presumption that a person will not have promiscuous relations till he says that that's what he wants to do. Or he will explicitly say that he's having relations on condition. But any other woman, if she's just sleeping around, that's not a reason to think she's married. By default, a prostitute is assumed to be having promiscuous relations. Till she explicitly says that it's for marriage. In other words, it's the opposite. If it's your wife, we assume marriage unless you explicitly say promiscuity. With a promiscuous woman, it's the opposite. By default, she's assumed to be promiscuous till we know she's being married. Certainly it's true of a woman who's a maidservant or a Gentile, where she doesn't even have the laws of marriage applying to her. We don't worry about it at all. And any children born from them are assumed to be goyim or a slave, until you know for sure that her mother was freed or converted. If somebody is known to be a married woman, and whether she is a fully consummated marriage or only a consecration, and then the same woman, there's a rumor now going around that she's divorced. Even if most of the city or all of the city is spreading this rumor that she's divorced, we don't have to worry about the rumor at all. She's assumed to be still married. But if all we have is a rumor that she was married, she was consecrated, and the rumor was substantiated in court, in which case she is doubtfully married, and then there's a new rumor that says she got divorced from that marriage. The same rumor which forbade her is the same rumor which will permit her. She's assumed to be divorced. So in other words, if you know that she's married, no rumor can undo that. But if only it's a rumor that she's married, then a new rumor can undo that. A man should never marry a woman if he intends to divorce her. And she shouldn't be living with you, serving you, when you have in mind to divorce her. As the Rebbe explains, this law is repeated twice in the Rambam. Here the Rambam means it as an essential element of marriage and divorce. Since marriage is about two people coming together, if you have in mind to divorce her, then the whole marriage isn't the full marriage. A man should never divorce his first wife unless he finds something promiscuous with her. As it says, in the actual verse about the divorce, it says, she won't find favor in his eyes. Why? Because he found a problematic thing. And in general, you shouldn't be too speedy to send away your first wife. The second wife, if you're married again, there's more room for leniency. You can send her away quicker, simply if you're resentful of her. If a woman has bad character traits, she is not modest like kosher Jewish girls. Mitzvah legarsha, it's actually a mitzvah to divorce her. As it says in Mishlei, garesh leitz v'yetze madin. Divorce the scoffer and let contention depart. If a woman was ever divorced because of bad behavior, no kosher guy should pick her up as a new wife. So nobody should say, here's a man who let a wicked woman out of his house, and this guy's taking her in. If somebody's wife became a deaf mute, he should divorce her with a proper divorce and she'll be divorced. But if she comes mentally unstable, you cannot divorce her until she becomes healthy. This is a sage's enactment to protect the woman's rights, so that not to leave her free for those who are immodest. She's mentally unstable, she cannot guard herself, she can't take care of herself, so you must take care of her. You can leave her alone, you can marry another woman, and feed her and give her to drink from her own estate, but you have to keep her under your roof. You're not obligated to give her clothing or food or conjugal relations of your own, because Torah recognizes it's impossible to live with a mentally unstable person in the same home for too long. You don't have to heal her, pay her medical bills. You don't have to redeem her if she's held in captivity. But the idea is you should keep her. No, you should keep her in the marriage. If you divorce her, she is divorced, even though you shouldn't do it. You let her out of the house. You don't have to care for her and go back and care for her. But again, the sages would prefer if you would keep her in the marriage, just to be able to take care of a woman who can't take care of herself.